Can death really change you so much that your own spouse doesn't recognize you? This woman's story is both heartbreaking and baffling.
Wednesday, February 16, 2022, 15:46 p.m. Certain components of this story began long before my illuminating encounter. I began experiencing chronic anxiety and panic episodes when I was 14 years old. I'm afflicted with a frightening sensation of impending doom every day. My sympathetic nervous system decided to turn on for good at this point. I began using antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs, not to mention that my personal life was in a state of disarray in more ways than one. I had seriously injured my back when I was 20 years old after falling after having an appendectomy. My crooked doctor at the time, who is no longer permitted to practice medicine, would prescribe me any opiate or benzo I desired in unlimited quantities. My addiction began to take hold, and it had an amazing capacity to demolish any feeling of self I had left. A year later, I reconnected with my ex-boyfriend. We adore one another, and he has witnessed all of the lovely disasters that come with having an addict for a girlfriend, who is always in fight or flight mode. My pulse rate would be around 130 BPM on average from the time I woke up until I went to bed. My subconscious was anything but peaceful. I was utterly out of control in my dream realm, and I would wake up in a panic from my dreams. I proceeded to accumulate worries and phobias for the next or final 7 years of my life. My lover, Tim, witnessed my self-sabotaged despite my best efforts to be level, which I plainly wasn't. Something significant. My mother and I were the closest mother and daughter could get. It's a parasitic symbiotic relationship, with her preying on me. My entire life she struggled with addiction, and we became drug companions when I was a teenager. I would have terrible dread and fear if I even said or thought about her dying, or not being there for me. We had a suicide pact since I was 13, and I'm sure we wanted to murder each other more than we wanted to kill ourselves most of the time. I would attempt to avoid drugs, and she would go out of her way to get me what I was avoiding. She was aware that I desired to change, but she did not want to lose her possession. I couldn't get away from her, no matter how horrible she was for me. Not literally, but mentally, as she had tightened her grasp on my throat through the years. My partner would tell me to run as far away from her as I could in the best way imaginable. I tried several times and failed badly each time. I woke up one morning in February 2014, struggling with a profound depression and an excessively high degree of anxiety, unable to breathe and coughing up blood. I drove myself to the hospital, and they hurried me into the emergency room after one look at me. Walking pneumonia in my left lung and 2 pulmonary embolisms were identified. My blood was 6 times thicker than it should have been, according to my D-dimer test. I was taking 5 Norco 10/325s per day and 3 mgs of Klonopin at the time. Because of my pain tolerance, the doctors could only barely control my discomfort. I was hospitalized for over 2 weeks. They put me on blood thinners and told me I needed to adjust my lifestyle, which I took seriously at the time. Even if they informed me I had averted death, the changes I would begin to make would barely scratch the surface, and would not even come close to addressing the root cause of what actually needed to happen. In January of 2016, death knocked again, this time in the form of a heart attack and cardiomyopathy. I awoke one morning, like with the embolisms, unable to breathe or even sit up. My lungs were filled with fluid and my hands were swollen to the point of insanity. I was driving myself to the hospital again, with a strange sense of déjà vu. When I arrived, they immediately brought me back to the ER, ran tests, and informed me I had a 50/50 chance of needing a heart transplant if it didn't clear up on its own. A week in the hospital. My partner and I broke up in January 2017, while we were still trying to live a no-opiate lifestyle. I was in a state of disbelief and began to look for drugs. My mother, unbeknownst to me, had met a charming young, clean-cut guy at the bank and thought to herself, "Oh, what a good guy you would be for my daughter." Despite the fact that she has the worst ability to judge a person's character, she gave him my phone number. I was shocked but not surprised by what she'd done. We were talking and meeting for the first time by the end of January. I assumed he was a decent enough person. Then came my watershed moment, the question that would take me to my death and rebirth. Can you tell me where I can buy some Norcos? He took a large prescription bottle full of Norcos from the center console without hesitation. My voyage into hell, the major leagues, had begun. I have very few firm memories between the months of February and June. The Chernobyl runaway train had taken control. Everyone in the room was waiting for the phone call that I had overdosed. I couldn't feel happy. All I could think of was a constant battle in my thoughts and misery. Complete, all-encompassing mental and spiritual suffering. I kept going to church and praying because it was the only way to gain a glimpse of hope that things may improve. On June 1st, I lost control of my vehicle, colliding with a parked vehicle and flipping it onto its side in the middle of the roadway. To get me out, the firefighters had to tear the roof off. I went to the hospital with a neck injury and was discharged the next day. This is when I began to lose the ability to express what was happening to me and how I had no control over what was happening to me. Tim came over to my house on June 4th and stated, "You're going to die." I was aware of it. An addict would go virtually any length to avoid experiencing the misery of opiate detox crawl up your spine when it comes to getting clean. I've done it and avoided it numerous times. But there was something different. It seemed as if my NDE began right here, at this precise moment. It didn't matter that I was on a lethal amount of opiates and benzos, 15 Norco 10/325, 10 Percocet 10/325, 4 8 mg strips of Suboxone, 6 mgs of Klonopin, and 6 mgs of Xanax per day. I couldn't fight Tim when he came to take me to detox. Something like a spiritual intervention had occurred, and whatever it was, it had completely disarmed me, which is contrary to my very nature. I recall not wanting to go to detox on that particular day. I tried to imagine what my life would be like if I just went back home, but there wasn't one. I'm not sure if I would have killed in a vehicle accident on the way home. One thing I was certain of was that if I wanted any kind of life, the path to the hospital was the only way to go. When I arrived at detox on the 6th, I wasn't afraid of getting sick or of all the great dreadful things that were about to happen. When you consider major, life-changing events in your life, you usually have good intentions behind your rationale. I didn't have any intentions, and I still don't. It felt as though my almost 28-year-long existence was coming to an end. I couldn't see the future after I was accepted. I had hit a limit in my subconscious. There was nothing at all. I opted to put my trust in the individuals who worked there, assuming they would consider how much medication I was on. They didn't do it. They took me off all opiates and reduced me to 3 mgs of Klonopin per day, along with the antidepressant I had been on for years. The horror and sickness kicked in on the second night of detox. My heart rate was stable at 157 BPM, my blood pressure was normal, and my temperature fluctuated from 102 to 96.0 and back up. I'd been through opiate detox before, but nothing could have prepared me for the amount of intensity that was creeping up on me. I awoke on the third day to a living nightmare. Never in my life did I expect to be in such excruciating pain, physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. My muscles were convulsing and I was saturated in cold perspiration. I spent 5 days in bed. I have almost no recollection of any of the 3. I shifted my weight to my right side and glanced at the wall. I was convinced that I was going to die. There was no doubt in my mind, and every time I got to the phone to contact Tim, I reminded him of it. I understood there was nothing I could do while imprisoned in the hospital. I stared at the wall, feeling colder and more helpless than I had ever felt before. I was ready to die. Then time stood still. I'm not sure if I was looking at my body or if I was slipping away, but someone was approaching my bed. He was my messenger, my guide, and he bore a physical likeness to Jesus. He stood about 5 feet 7 inches tall and had lovely light brown hair. He was clothed in a white suit that had its own depth and life within it when inspected closely. That color had never meant so much to me before. It represented purity and security. He walked over to the foot of my bed in his sandals. The remainder of the memories are like still frame photographs. I had exited my body and was now half a foot away from him at eye level. I could grasp and understand what he was saying to me without words with every look he gave me. Telepathy, for example. I was just air at this point, with a 360-degree view of everything. He urged me to turn around and gaze at myself in bed with his face. I could instantly see myself without turning. I was extremely pale and motionless. I wasn't sure if I was still breathing. When I returned his gaze, he gave me a glance that stated, "Your anguish is not unnoticed. There is another area where there is no pain." I noticed him looking at the wall in front of me, so I did as well. On the wall was what appeared to be one of those false tunnel paintings used in cartoons. I kept looking, and the longer I looked, the deeper and more distinct this tunnel got. Inside the tunnel, there was no smooth surface. It was gray in hue, with circles all around the inside and a shiny, almost wet rock appearance. The more I peered at it, the deeper it went into eternity with a faint glow. Because I no longer possessed my body, when my eyes or eyesight reached a certain point in the tunnel, everything went black. It's dark, and there's nothing there. There are no sounds, emotions, or fears. I've landed in a place of light, not blindingly brilliant, but warm and welcoming. It was a region where the Earth's units of space and time did not apply. A straight line, similar to a horizon line, was visible in the distance in front of me. It was both white and black, like a flickering light. An orb was located in the center of this horizontal line. A white ticking light ball. It had all of the information that has ever existed or will ever exist. It was so lively and moving so fast that it made everything appear to be frozen in time, like an optical illusion. It faded into a faint yellow, then a gorgeous orange outside the dazzling ball of white. I could glance below and above and see for miles. I was in a state where I had become both everything and nothing. I was simply hovering in one place like a gas. There was no reason for me to attempt to navigate through this region. I was just being. What do people think you need to see if you don't have my body or eyes? This location was neither euphoric nor painful. I was not scared. I'd come to accept everything that was going on. Fear, wrath, hatred, or self-punishment had no place in this realm. The signals were absolutely silent, but loud with no phonetic structure. A language that is incomprehensible on Earth or due to the limits of our physical bodies. I had attained an unmistakable level of acceptance and comprehension. I wasn't asked if I wanted to go back to my flesh, but something drew me back to it. The next thing I remember is the nurse checking my vitals, which they did every 4 hours. I'm not sure how long I was away. It may have been 4 minutes or it could have been 4 hours. I was still quite unwell and unable to understand what had transpired for the following few days. All I knew was that I was certain I was going to die. Knowing you're about to die is a life-changing experience. On the 16th of June, I emerged from the hospital as a new version of myself. Mentally, the tension and terror that had governed my existence for so long had vanished. It was as if I'd never had it. The addiction that had accompanied me for so long had now vanished. Dying was a cleansing process for me. All the things that had previously dominated me did not hold water when I traveled to this other realm. And when I returned to my body, all those crippling ailments were fled. It felt as if I had been filtered, and only my most pure self was permitted to return. This is not to say that I was not in shock. Almost everything was the same, except it had been slightly tweaked. My body was picking up on all kinds of cues. I had a physical panic episode during which my body was in fight or flight mode, but my higher brain was completely calm. It took a few months for my body to start listening to my head. I had to unplug everything electrical, including the Wi-Fi, when I arrived home. Within my sensoromotor nerve system, I could feel a buzzing. I had quit taking my antidepressant and anti-anxiety meds within a week of leaving detox. This was the first time I hadn't taken any medicines since I was 14 years old. It's difficult to convey my current life and mental state. It's barely been 5 months since I started this new life. I'm certain that if I hadn't had this encounter, I would have died. Tim, my lover, is astounded by all that I am capable of and only the things that I beseech. Things that have had the most impact on me in this parallel universe have happened without my knowledge. For example, I had always parted my hair on the left side. One day, I realized I was separating my hair on the wrong side. In my sleep, I astral project. My dreams and how my subconscious perceives myself in my dream world have completely changed. I used to have no control over what happened in my dreams, and I'd end up doing something I knew I shouldn't, then wake up in a panic. When I dream today, everything is so vivid and I am awake most of the time. In any way, fear is not a part of my existence. My toxic relationship with my mother, which I never imagined I'd be able to break, has been severed. She doesn't even resemble my mother. Alex's mother was her name. It doesn't feel natural to call myself Alex. Alex was like a twin to me my entire life, then she died. At the same moment, I feel everything and nothing. My empathy for individuals is stronger than ever, but so is my ability to defend myself. Places with bright lights, loud noises, or a large crowd become sensory overloads for me. I spend the most of my time at home. I no longer use social media and do not own a cell phone. I enjoy watching people's responses when you tell them that. I feel utterly insane not being able to interact with anyone at any time or place. The irony is that I am capable of doing so. I've never been able to draw in my life. I'd always wanted to but lacked the talent. Surprisingly, I can now draw. Faces, details, and shadows. My coordination is better than it has ever been. My new poems have a completely different flavor than all of my past work. I don't have any drug cravings and am even resistant to taking ibuprofen. I rarely use a clock because Earth time does not appear to be correct. I now base my life on nature. I don't have a car and don't want to. My ideas are hazy and fuzzy, and my thirst for knowledge grows stronger by the day. I go through phases where I weep a lot. Not because of despair or any other typical feeling. I'm just so moved that I can't help but cry. It's almost as though it has its own language. I attempted to describe to my partner what it's like to be who I am now, but I'm at a loss for words. There are so many restrictions on this physical plane of existence, between our delicate, sensitive, mushy bodies and the rules that govern it. Even sitting here on my couch, which appears to be silent, everything has its own life within it. Every angel in the room can be felt, and different materials or textures dance to their own frequency. Every day, I feel like I'm on a psychedelic trip as I try to digest all of these new events. Is it conceivable for someone to feel so dissimilar to themselves that they lament the loss of their identity? Alex is like a reincarnation. I'm just 5 months old and I've still got a lot to learn. I miss her essence at times, but I'm such a more polished, pure version of who I might be. I can't relate to Alex unless I look back to when I was a youngster, under the age of 7. I feel like a kid again, but with an adult in charge keeping things in order. Now is the time for me to get to know myself. It's genuinely a joy to be alive for the first time in my life. This is my life.